Hi guys, I'm back and today I'm going to be sharing with you what I think an investment bag is and is not. Before I get started, if you're new here, welcome. I make videos about all sorts of stuff, but a lot of it does have to do with my views on consumerism, particularly luxury consumerism, and how I reconcile that with my logical side. So hopefully you'll see stuff you like and subscribe. Now, as to today's topic, I want to say first of all that this is my opinion and I could be totally wrong. Nothing I say here should be offensive to any of you because it is just a bag after all, but I know some people do take some things personally, but please just remember it's my opinion, so you are absolutely welcome to disagree. Now for me, for a bag to be an investment bag, it has to meet a pretty high threshold. And namely, it has to be at least somewhere close to the idea of a real investment. And that definition is a thing that you buy today that may be profitable to you in the future. When it comes to most consumer durable goods, things that you use day to day, because you're using them after you purchase them, they depreciate over time. And that is certainly true for most bags. But in the case of investment bags, that may or may not be true depending on how you use the bag and the condition it's in, and if you just happen to time your purchase correctly with the market, so to speak. So first, with the exception of, random collector's items that everyone knows is just a limited time only, for a bag to be a true investment bag, it needs to be something that's produced year in and year out and has high demand consistently. And in the case of most bags, that is just not true. There are things that come in for a few seasons, and then because the sales wane, because demand slows, the company, the brand, decides to kill that design and introduce something new. So really there are only 3 brands, the triumvirate, so to speak, that have managed to have pieces that are truly timeless and produced year in and year out and maintain consistent demand. And those are, of course, HERMES, Chanel, and Louis Vuitton. All 3 of these brands have super rich histories, and that certainly contributes to the demand for their goods, and they've just really done a really good job, and many times artificially, of creating demand for their products. I mean, kudos to them. They have excellent brand managers and have done a great job in capitalizing on that, so I can't fault them. And as someone who is interested in handbags and luxury handbags, I certainly am interested in those 3 brands, even if Louis Vuitton in particular has done some highly questionable things over the years. So that's for another video. Okay, so just looking at those 3, the triumvirate, so to speak, of course with Hermes you have the Kelly bag, which has been around since the late 1800s in some shape, originally as a saddle bag to be used with horses. Then you have the Birkin, which was introduced in the 80s and has been a standout success, a runaway success really, for the company since then. They've been trying to do some new, iterations of Birkins, hoping to land the next big timeless bag with things like the Lindy and the toolbox, but unfortunately none of those other designs have really quite caught on the fervor of the Kelly or the Birkin. So I would say of Hermes, those 2, and possibly the Constance, would be considered timeless. Now with Chanel, you obviously have the classic flaps and the reissues, and more recently, the boy bag. I'm personally still on the fence about the boy bag. It seems to have some sticking power, but it's only been a few years, so time will tell. For me personally, I don't love the bag. I'm not saying that I'll never get one, who knows, but just anytime I've seen them in person and interacted with them, it doesn't feel as well designed to me as the classic, so I've always opted for a classic. Next, then with Louis Vuitton, they have so many styles and they introduce so many new ones every year. It's actually shocking to me that they managed to maintain their appeal and allure in spite of themselves, to be quite honest. But they do have several timeless designs, and of course the Louis Vuitton trunk, first and foremost. If you have a vintage trunk, you probably have college tuition paid, so that's certainly an item that is timeless and definitely an investment. Then they have a lot of other designs like the Alma, the Speedy, though that would also be considered, I would say, one of their timeless designs, and they will produce and continue to produce year in and year out and see demand for those products. So from a timeless perspective, the fact that they are produced year in and year out is truly key to kind of meeting that threshold, because if you think about other bags that are not what I would consider an investment bag, they were hot for a few seasons and now have fell off the radar. One great example is a bag that I remember in the mid 2000s was all the rage, the Chloe Paddington. It was kind of the first bag that I can remember anyway that Chloe made that really brought them to the limelight. And I remember really liking them at the time because I guess, you know, that was just the bag. But now you can buy them for like less than 200 bucks on eBay. So from an investment standpoint, that's certainly not something that was a good one. In contrast, maybe in 2005, had you spent the money on a Chanel Classic Flap, that same Chanel Classic Flap in good condition today would probably be around 3,000 bucks. And back in 2005, the Chanel Classic Flap was less than 2,000, I believe. So that clearly demonstrates that Paddington versus a classic flap, there's just no comparison. And it's the fact that the classic flap has remained classic and timeless and highly desirable all these years, whereas the Paddington was just a passing fancy. And then when you think about a lot of the brands that are popular now, I hear a lot of people asking, you know, oh, would you consider like Gucci an investment bag or anything like that? I would say it's too early to tell for sure, but looking historically, the answer would be no. Gucci was very popular in the 90s thanks to Tom Ford, but other than some of his classic advertisements and gorgeous clothing, to be sure, I can't think of a single bag that has remained as something that we all want and desire year in and year out. And now that Gucci has been resuscitated, much needed resuscitation, under Alessandro Michel, he has done an amazing job with the whole reimaging of Gucci, and I have to say there are a lot of bags that I really like the small little velvet Gucci Marmont. However, I just don't think those are investment bags, and so for me to be willing to spend thousands of dollars on something that is definitely not worth thousands of dollars from a labor material standpoint, I have to truly, truly love a bag and be really thoughtful about it if I know that it's not, or if I don't think it's going to be an investment bag. In contrast, something like Chanel, yes, the price is ridiculous, but I feel comfortable buying it because I trust that down the road it won't be a horrible choice if I decide that, oh, you know, I actually don't like this style anymore and I want to pass it on. So yeah, that isn't to say that, you know, designer bags should not be purchased unless it's an investment bag. Certainly not. Like I said, that Gucci Marmont, and then right now I'm also really obsessed with the Chloe Faye, but I also just have to be really thoughtful and be sure that I'm willing to part with quite a lot of money to use those bags for perhaps a temporary period of time. So definitely I encourage you guys to not just, you know, buy any designer bag willy-nilly thinking of it as an investment bag. You just have to be very clear about kind of what you want out of something and how you're spending your money on it. Okay, now that I've talked about what I think an investment bag is, I do want to share also what I think it is not. And an investment bag is not a substitute for an actual investment. I know it was popular to say, even now I think, that investing in Hermes is a better investment than the stock market, but if you just look at the numbers, overall that is just not true. So I think when that statistic came out, it was true for that period of time when the stocks were down. However, if you look at the long term, a true investment, like a riskier financial investment in stocks, or potentially real estate, those do show higher returns over time. Of course, unlike investment bags, those financial investments do have risks associated with them, which is why you sometimes get the random statistic that an investment in Hermes is better than in the stock market. But let's just look at the numbers. So on this chart, I have plotted the prices that I was able to find for a Chanel medium flap, a Birkin, and a Kelly. I'm not sure what the sizes are for the Birkin and Kelly, but these were just the published numbers that I was able to find. And I'm looking at these prices from 1992 present day 2017. So just looking at the 1990 price for Chanel, you went from $11.50 to today's price of $4,900. For the Birkin, much better, of $27.50 to now over $12,000. And then the Kelly, a more expensive bag in the 90s just because the Birkin was still relatively new at that time and the Kelly had already established itself, but the growth for the Kelly has not been as significant as the Birkin. Now next to these, I'm also now plotting the CAGRs, and a CAGR is the compound annual growth rate, which I assume you guys all know what compounding is, so I'm not going to go into that finance 101, but a CAGR then is essentially the constant rate that would get you from point A to point B, assuming compounding over those periods. So in this case, from 1990 to 2017, we're looking at 27 periods, and so the CAGR to get you from point A to point B for a Chanel would be 5.5%. For the Birkin, you're looking at 5.6%, and then for the Kelly, you're looking at 2.5%. Now I'm adding on the Dow Jones Industrial Average, to this chart, and we can see that the Dow has gone from 2,900 roughly like mid-year 1990 to now over 20,000 in 2017, and that was a huge achievement just a few days ago. It was the first time it's hit over 20,000, so certainly record highs for the Dow right now. But that CAGR is then 12% over that 27 period. So that means if in 1990 you spent 2,900 bucks investing in an index of the Dow, that today would be worth 20,000 bucks. So certainly it's a better return than any of those bags. And also with those bags, that return is also a little bit misleading because that assumes that you can sell a 27-year-old bag for what a new one would cost retail today. And again, barring the rare collectible item, that is just not true, because no way would you be able to sell a 27-year-old Chanel for 4,900 bucks. But you probably could sell it for around 3,000 if it was in good shape. So yeah, it is something to be aware of when it comes to bag investments versus actual investments, and those two should not be confused. In that way, I also again reiterate that you should never go into debt buying luxury items, and in fact, you should probably be planning for your retirement before you start spending all your cash on luxury. I have been fortunate in that I have a job that pays me well enough that I can support both my nest egg and, frivolous purchases every now and then. That is what I wanted to share with you guys today, and I hope you enjoyed the video and found something useful in it. Don't forget to rate, comment, subscribe, and I will see you next time. Oh, and also if you are celebrating the Lunar New Year, Happy New Year! I'm definitely enjoying a lot of dumplings this weekend. Alright guys, bye!